beginning of May 1945. As soon as the Second World War in Europe ended, the Americans captured as many German generals as possible to interrogate them and obtain from them all the information they could get. Despite the fact that they have just won the war, they are aware that this has only been possible because the German army was completely depleted on the Eastern Front, since it was really there that the true clash of the Titans took place. So, what the Americans wanted to know was, in the first place, how a country like Germany had been able to withstand the attacks of the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and the United States, together with all their colonies and allies, for so long. And second, they wanted to learn the tactics of the German army in order to improve the performance of the American army if it was determined that they were indeed superior. One of the main objectives of this was to be more efficient if they were to face the Soviet Union in the future. Due to the great importance and involvement that Guderian had during practically all phases of the conflict, he was one of the main generals in whom the Americans showed the most interest and who most interrogated. It was precisely at the end of May 1945 when Guderian was given the first interrogation of military interest, as we remember that Guderian had been the chief of the general staff of the German army only 2 months before. So, these that we are going to see below are some of the answers that Guderian gave in those days when the war had just ended, about the most important military actions of the last months of the conflict. One of these early issues was the German failure to defend Normandy, and the reasons why Guderian believed the Allies had succeeded in that invasion. Guderian's reply was as follows. Although a number of mistakes were made in the German preparation for the Allied invasion of France, the main factor influencing Allied success was the failure of the German Air Force. Guderian then commented that in his opinion, the Allied fighters were better than the Germans who were technologically behind. In any case, the main reason was the low presence of the Luftwaffe during the Battle of Normandy, which gave the Allies total superiority in the sky, which completely paralyzed the German communications network. Later, Guderian directly blames Hitler, who did not let his generals act freely, and who had the power of certain panzer divisions. Finally, he says that another mistake in this battle was to fix the entire defense on the Atlantic Wall, for which other rear defensive lines that could have been very effective were weakened. Before continuing with this analysis, which Guderian made a few weeks after the end of the conflict, we have to indicate that Guderian did not have at that time all the information from both sides that we have today, and that is why he says some things that are not there entirely correct. The next operation was the defense of the Eastern Front at the end of 1944, with the Vistula River as the main axis of defense. Guderian indicated that in a similar way to what happened on the Western Front, on the Eastern Front there was no fortified defensive line with guarantees of withstanding the final Soviet offensive. It was here precisely where Guderian directed his main efforts, with the aim of preventing the Soviets from reaching Germany. On the other hand, Guderian indicated that the presence of the Luftwaffe was practically non-existent on the Eastern Front, although he points out that the Soviet aviation was not as well coordinated as the English and the American ones. Thus, Guderian considered that a small German air force could be considerably more effective on the Eastern Front than on the Western. Guderian further regards Himmler's appointment as Commander-in-Chief of Army Group Vistula as catastrophic, even though this was done after the German front had been widely penetrated. Thus, and knowing that it would be difficult for them to maintain the situation, Guderian strove to try to reach peace on one of the combat fronts, and for this he had numerous conversations with Ribbentrop, Speer, or even Goebbels. According to the Panzer General, they all told him that they agreed with him that the best thing would be to seek a diplomatic solution to the situation, but they could not carry it out due to Hitler's refusal. Regarding the warnings of the attack that the Soviets were going to carry out at the end of 1944 or the beginning of January 1945, Guderian comments that this was information that those in charge of the Eastern Front knew quite well, but that once again Hitler refused to give it credibility. The German leader considered that the Soviets would need a long time to regroup after their summer offensives in 1944, and it was impossible for them to attack again on a large scale at such an early date. Due to this, from the beginning of November 1944, the German leader sent to the west a large part of the units that Guderian had been concentrating on the Eastern Front for months. These forces were to participate in the Ardennes offensive, and also reinforce the Ruhr Basin, which had been threatened by the Allies for months. This was another mistake that, according to Guderian, Hitler made, because according to him, the Ruhr Basin was crushed by Allied aviation and had a very low production. On the other hand, in Upper Silesia, and other areas close to the Eastern Front, there were still many mines and industry that were in full swing. Finally, Guderian was asked what his opinion was on the Ardennes offensive, and this is what he said. From the first moment he knew that the operation had very little chance of success, but he had no choice but to devote all his attention to it because it was the last chance they had to avoid the war in a catastrophic way. Thus, his most powerful armored units were used in it, and for him it was of special interest to know what his status and situation was at all times. Finally, Guderian affirms that as of December 20th, 4 days after it began, the offensive should have been cancelled, because it was clearly seen that the American resistance was much stronger than expected and that it was not going to be possible to achieve the objectives. However, the offensive continued on Hitler's orders, and when they wanted to reinforce other sectors, it was already too late. Well, and once this is seen, let's finally see a series of personal opinions that Guderian told the Americans about some of the most famous German generals. De Kesselring said that he was a very intelligent and capable man, although he is also a great opportunist. De Rundstedt said that he was the best general Germany had in service during the last months of the war. In addition, he said that he was a serious man and that he still had the trust of the German people. And finally, regarding Erwin Rommel, Guderian commented that he had many deficiencies as a quarterback. He said that his task should have been limited at most to leading an army corps of a couple of divisions, but never large formations. Guderian indicated that Rommel led entire armies as if they were a single division, and that he lacked global vision. Without a doubt, these are hard words from very hard men. In any case, I hope you have found this program interesting, and you have been able to see what Guderian's first impressions were after the end of World War II, being quite accurate in general terms, as would later be seen after many studies. If you are interested in more Guderian's opinions, which we can find in this book by I. Guderian, such as his considerations about the German failure in Russia, and the reasons for his dismissal, let me know in the comment box. Thank you all for being part of this community, and especially the sponsors who make this possible. Subscribe and share this program if you liked it, and we'll see each other here as always, next Thursday and Sunday. See you soon.